The moment a bully slammed my 70-year-old father onto the cold grocery store floor, the entire room froze. His cane skidded across the tiles. A bag of oranges burst open, and fruit rolled silently between strangers who suddenly found the floor more interesting than the violence unfolding in front of them. The man laughed as if humiliating an old veteran was just another joke, daring anyone to challenge him. My father didn't cry out. He simply adjusted his glasses with trembling hands and tried to stand, his quiet dignity somehow making the scene even harder to watch. I felt a familiar calm settle over me. Not fear, not rage, but the discipline that had been drilled into me through decades of command. The bully looked straight at me with a smug grin, convinced I was just another helpless bystander. He had no idea that I had spent years commanding army rangers, or that the most devastating victories are rarely won with fists. As I helped my father back to his feet, I silently decided that this man's laughter would not survive the day. People often assume that strength is loud. They expect confidence to arrive with raised voices, expensive suits, or a convoy of security vehicles. I learned decades ago that real authority usually walks into a room unnoticed. By the time others recognize it, the outcome has already been decided. My name isn't important. The uniform I once wore has been folded away for years, and I never introduce myself by rank anymore. I spent most of my adult life leading Army Rangers, making decisions where mistakes cost lives instead of pride. Those years taught me patience, discipline, and something even more valuable, the ability to stay calm while everyone else surrendered to emotion. Retirement changed my surroundings, but not my principles. I returned home to spend time with my father, a 70-year-old man whose quiet integrity had shaped every value I carried into military service. After my mother passed away, he never complained about loneliness. He tended his small garden, greeted every neighbor with respect, and insisted on solving his own problems. Even when age made simple tasks difficult, people looked at us and saw an old man leaning on a cane and a middle-aged son wearing ordinary clothes. They never imagined the history hidden beneath that ordinary picture. I preferred it that way. Recognition had never interested me. Peace did. Still, I noticed how easily society overlooked people like my father. Younger men interrupted him. Strangers ignored him in lines, and some mistook his kindness for weakness. Each incident was small enough to dismiss, but together they revealed something troubling about the world around us. My father always smiled and told me to let it go. Respect isn't something you can demand, he would say. People reveal their character by how they treat those who can't fight back. His words stayed with me. That afternoon in the grocery store, I realized the bully wasn't simply attacking an elderly man. He was betting that everyone watching, including me, would choose comfort over courage. He couldn't have been more wrong. I helped my father into a nearby chair while the store manager finally appeared, not with concern, but with hesitation. His eyes shifted between my father's bruised shoulder and the younger man standing confidently in the middle of the aisle. Instead of asking who needed medical attention, he quietly asked, "Can everyone just calm down?" The bully smirked. He straightened his expensive jacket as though nothing important had happened. "The old man bumped into me," he said with a careless shrug. "He should watch where he's going." Several customers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one challenged him. One woman picked up her shopping basket and quietly walked away. Another man pulled out his phone, only to lower it again after meeting the bully's cold stare. My father rested a hand on my arm. "It's not worth it," he whispered, his voice steady despite the pain. "Let's just go home." That was who he had always been. Even after being humiliated, his first instinct was to prevent conflict rather than create it. The bully wasn't finished. As we turned toward the exit, he laughed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe it's time someone takes your driver's license too, old man." A few nervous chuckles escaped from people who clearly didn't find the joke funny, but were afraid to stand apart from the crowd. I looked back for only a second. He mistook my silence for surrender. Our eyes met across the checkout lanes. He gave me a slow, mocking smile, then spread his hands as if inviting me to do something about it. Years earlier, I might have accepted that invitation. Experience had taught me that anger often hands victory to the wrong person, so I simply memorized his face, the name stitched onto his work shirt, the company logo on his cap, the license plate visible through the front window. Every small detail settled into place with the same quiet precision I had relied on throughout my military career. The bully walked away believing the story was over. For me, it had only just begun. I drove my father home in complete silence. He stared out the passenger window, gently holding an ice pack against his shoulder as if he were more embarrassed than injured. Before getting out of the car, he looked at me with tired eyes. "Promise me you won't do anything reckless." I smiled faintly. "I won't." It wasn't a lie. Reckless decisions belong to people chasing revenge through anger. I had learned long ago that patience accomplishes far more than rage ever could. After making sure my father was comfortable, I sat alone in my study. I replayed every second of the incident in my mind, not to relive the humiliation, but to understand it. The bully hadn't acted out of impulse. He behaved like someone who had never been held accountable. The confidence in his voice, the ease with which he dismissed an elderly man, and the silence of everyone around him told me this wasn't his first victim. That realization changed everything. This was no longer about settling a personal score. If he had done this before, he would do it again unless someone forced him to face the consequences of his own actions. I opened my notebook and began writing down every detail. I remembered the exact time, the names on nearby checkout counters, the store layout, the employees who had witnessed everything, and the license plate of the truck parked outside. Years in military command had taught me that facts defeat excuses. Then my phone rang. It was a retired police captain I had served beside during emergency operations years earlier. He had already heard whispers about the incident from someone who recognized me at the store. His first question was simple. "Do you want justice, or do you just want revenge?" I looked toward the living room where my father was quietly reading, refusing to complain despite everything that had happened. "I want accountability," I answered calmly. At that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The bully believed he had won because everyone stayed silent. He was about to discover that silence can be the most dangerous response of all. The next morning, I treated the situation the way I had approached every serious mission throughout my military career, with discipline, evidence, and patience. Emotion had no place in planning. It blurred judgment, and I couldn't afford that. My first stop was the grocery store before the morning rush. I politely requested an incident report and asked that the security footage from every camera covering the entrance and checkout lanes be preserved. The manager seemed surprised that I wasn't demanding apologies or making threats. Instead, I calmly explained that deleting evidence after a reported assault could create legal problems for everyone involved. His expression changed immediately. Next, I contacted the retired police captain again. He wasn't there to pull favors or bend rules. His advice was simple. Document everything. Let the evidence speak, and never give the other side an opportunity to claim harassment or intimidation. That was exactly my intention. Using my military training, I organized every detail into a timeline. Photographs of my father's bruises, medical records from the clinic, witness names, receipts showing the exact time we entered the store, and notes describing the bully's actions word for word. Small details often become the strongest evidence because they are difficult to dispute. By afternoon, I learned something unexpected. The bully wasn't just another customer. He owned a local contracting company that depended heavily on municipal contracts and maintained a carefully polished public image. Respect and trust were the foundation of his business. He had attacked the wrong person, not because I could overpower him, but because I understood systems better than confrontations. One reckless punch from me would have made me the villain. A carefully documented case would force him to answer for his own behavior. As I closed the final folder, I felt no excitement and no anger, only certainty. The bully believed power came from making people afraid to speak. I intended to prove that real power comes from knowing exactly when to speak and having undeniable evidence when that moment arrives. 3 days later, I received confirmation that the store's security footage had been secured and that multiple witnesses had provided written statements. My father's medical report documented the injuries to his shoulder and wrist, leaving very little room for denial. Only then did I take the next step. I filed a formal police report and submitted every piece of evidence in chronological order. No emotional speeches, no dramatic accusations, just facts, supported by timestamps, photographs, witness accounts, and video. The investigation moved faster than I expected. When detectives interviewed the store employees separately, every story matched the footage. The bully's version, however, changed each time he repeated it. First, he claimed my father had attacked him. Later, he insisted it had been an accident. The evidence contradicted both claims. A week later, I learned that his contracting company had been notified of the investigation because several of his projects involved public contracts. The allegations triggered an internal review of his professional conduct. Clients who valued reputation began asking difficult questions. He suddenly wanted to talk. His lawyer contacted mine, asking whether we would consider settling the matter privately. They hinted that a public case could damage his business beyond repair. I declined. My father hadn't been humiliated in private. Justice didn't belong behind closed doors either. The court hearing was brief. The surveillance footage played without interruption. The courtroom remained silent as everyone watched a 70-year-old man struck without warning, then left on the floor while the attacker laughed. For the first time since that afternoon, the bully wasn't smiling. The judge ordered him to pay restitution for my father's medical expenses, complete community service, and serve a suspended sentence that would become active if he committed another violent offense. As he walked out of the courthouse surrounded by reporters, he kept his head down, avoiding every camera. I simply helped my father into the car. He looked at me, smiled quietly, and said, "You kept your promise." I nodded. I hadn't sought revenge through violence. I had simply given the truth enough room to speak. News of the court's decision spread through our town faster than I expected. People who had remained silent in the grocery store suddenly found their voices. Several witnesses admitted they had wanted to help my father but had been afraid of becoming the bully's next target. A few even came to our house to apologize. My father accepted every apology with the same grace he had shown throughout the ordeal. "There is always another chance to choose courage," he told them. "Just don't wait until it's too late." The grocery store also changed. Management introduced additional staff training on handling violent incidents, updated their emergency response procedures, and installed signs encouraging customers to report abuse immediately instead of looking the other way. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but it was a meaningful one. Sometimes lasting change begins with a single moment that people refuse to ignore. The bully's reputation suffered far more than any legal penalty. Around town, people no longer saw him as a confident businessman. They saw the surveillance footage in their minds, a strong man striking someone old enough to be his father. Trust, once broken, proved far more difficult to rebuild than he had imagined. As for me, I returned to my quiet routine. Friends congratulated me, but I never felt victorious. Real victory wasn't watching another person lose everything. It was seeing my father walk through the same grocery store weeks later with his head held high, knowing he had nothing to be ashamed of. The experience reminded me that character is revealed in ordinary moments, not extraordinary ones. Every person who witnessed that assault had faced a choice: stay silent or stand for what was right. Some hesitated, some regretted it, and a few found the courage to step forward when it mattered most. That's why this story matters. Because most of us will never command soldiers or stand in a courtroom defending our family. But every one of us will eventually face a moment when silence feels easier than courage. When that day comes, the choice we make will define us far more than the person standing in front of us. Life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. Every Saturday morning, my father and I still visited the same grocery store. The first time we walked through those automatic doors again, I noticed people recognizing us. A few offered quiet smiles. Others nodded respectfully before continuing with their shopping. Nothing was said aloud, but everything had changed. My father stopped beside the fruit display where the incident had happened. He picked up an orange, examined it for a moment, then placed it gently into the cart. "I think we've taken this place back," he said with a small smile. I laughed for the first time in weeks. The anger I had carried since that afternoon was gone. It hadn't disappeared because the bully had been punished. It disappeared because I had refused to become like him. I hadn't allowed humiliation to turn into hatred or pain into violence. Instead, I trusted patience, truth, and the rule of law. Looking back, I realized the greatest lesson wasn't about defeating one arrogant man. It was about protecting the values my father had spent a lifetime teaching me. Strength without discipline becomes intimidation. Discipline guided by integrity becomes justice. Months later, my father's shoulder had healed completely. He was back in his garden, trimming roses and greeting neighbors with the same kindness he had always shown. The attack had not stolen his dignity, because dignity is never taken by force. It is surrendered only when we abandon our principles. As for me, I no longer think about the bully. His story belongs to the choices he made. Mine belongs to the choice I made after watching my father fall. If our experience encourages even one person to stand beside the vulnerable instead of looking away, then the pain we endured was not meaningless. Some victories are measured in applause. The most important ones are measured in the quiet confidence that, when the moment came, you chose honor over anger, and you never had to raise your voice to be heard.